My father slid a shoebox across the brunch table and said, "We sold Grandma's house. It stays in the family. Sweetheart, this is your share." Inside the box was a dish towel, a church bulletin, and a photograph of a woman he had already erased. Here is what he did not say. That house was never his to sell. My grandmother had signed it over to me 4 years earlier, deed recorded, my name on it, in ink, at the county. And here is what he did not know. 2 years before that brunch, someone had filed a new deed with my signature on it. A signature I never wrote. I have spent 9 years reading deeds for a living. I am a senior title examiner. Catching forged documents is not a hobby for me. It is my job description. Today, the deed to that house carries one name, mine. How is Bang Team? And the man who traced my signature onto a piece of paper signs his own name now with a probation officer watching him. Do it. My name is Nora Calloway. I am 34 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. If you have ever been the family member who was counted on for everything and counted as nothing, if you have ever watched your own history get rewritten at a dinner table while everyone nodded along, comment the word erased below. Because this story is for you. Stay with me. The most boring piece of paper in that county courthouse was about to become the thing that took my family's whole performance apart. To understand what happened at that brunch, you have to go back 9 years before it, to the day I took a job that everyone in my family considered a punchline. 9 years before that Sunday, I walked into a title insurance company on the north side of Columbus and asked for an entry-level examiner position. A title examiner is the person who reads a property's paper history before it changes hands. Every sale, every loan, every lien, every name that ever touched a piece of land leaves a record at the county. And my job is to read that record and make sure the story adds up. My father thought this was hilarious. My father sold real estate for 30 years. He had his face on bus benches. He had a golf shirt with his own slogan stitched on the chest, and his daughter had taken a job in what he called the basement of the industry. At Thanksgiving that year, he raised a glass and said, "To Nora, who reads the fine print so people like me can make the actual money." Everyone laughed. My sister laughed. The longest. Let me tell you about my sister, because you cannot understand this family without her. Bryn is 3 years younger than me. From the time she could talk, the rule of our house was simple, and it was never spoken out loud, which is how the strongest rules work. Bryn was the light. I was the ballast. Bryn forgot to pay her car insurance, and my father called it charming. I paid for my own braces at 22, working weekends, and my mother called it Nora being dramatic about money again. If you grew up as the responsible one, the one who was praised exactly never, and relied on exactly always, you already know the shape of this. You know it in your body. There was one person in that family who saw me. My grandmother, June, my father's mother. She lived in a little brick house on Rosemere Avenue in Clintonville, with a green front door and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and dish soap for 50 years. Every report card, every promotion, every small brave thing I ever did, June wrote it down on an index card and put the card in her recipe box, filed between the pie crusts and the casseroles. She called me Nora Bird. She was the only one who did. 8 months into my first year at the title company, I was assigned to a trainer, a senior examiner named Delia, 26 years in the business, glasses on a chain. a red pencil she sharpened with a pocket knife. Delia taught me how to read a chain of title, the way some people read a family Bible. Hold on to Delia. She matters later. And so does one thing she taught me in my first month. She tapped a recorded deed with that red pencil and said, "People forget on purpose, honey. Paper remembers." I wrote it on a sticky note. It stayed on my monitor for 9 years. 4 years before that Sunday brunch. In the spring, my grandmother June called me on a Tuesday and asked me to drive her to an attorney's office. She was 81. She was sharp as a tack, and she knew exactly what she was doing. In that office, she signed the house on Rosemere Avenue over to me, a straightforward transfer deed. My name as the new owner, properly witnessed, properly notarized, recorded at the Franklin County Recorder's Office that same week. She wanted it done while she was alive, in daylight, with no room for argument. In the parking lot afterward, she pressed her brass front door key into my palm and folded my fingers over it. "You keep this on your ring." "Nora Bird," she said. "A house should know whose pocket its key lives in." I put that brass key on my key ring, next to my car key. It stayed there, through everything that came after. Remember the key. Remember the recipe box. We are coming back for both of them. June asked me for one favor. Do not announce it. She did not want her last years spent refereeing a war between her son and her granddaughter. So, I kept it quiet. She kept living in her house. I kept my name on her deed. And the family kept assuming that everything June owned would flow to my father. The way everything always had. That silence was a kindness to her. It also built the exact dark room my father would later work in. 3 years before that Sunday, in the summer, June died in her sleep with the windows open. At the funeral, my father stood at the podium and told a story about the house, about growing up in it, about how it would always be the heart of the family. Then he looked out at the pews and said the sentence I want you to remember. Because he said it that day, and he said it a dozen times after. Always in the same warm closing. The Deal voice. Whatever happens, it stays in the family. People nodded. I nodded too. I owned the house he was talking about, and I said nothing, because you do not correct a eulogy. That was my mistake. Not the silence at the funeral. The 18 months of silence after it. Here is where I have to be honest with you about my own part. Because a story where the narrator did nothing wrong is a story someone is selling you. After the funeral, my father said he would handle the house, clear it out, keep it maintained, rent it to a nice young couple, and put the rent aside. Quote, "For whenever we sort the estate." I was 31. I was working 60-hour weeks. I had just made senior examiner, and some worn-down childhood part of me was pathetically glad he wanted to handle something with me instead of around me. So I let him. I did not check the county records on my own grandmother's house. The locksmith does not lock her own door. 6 months later, I would learn that the rent was $1,450 a month. Keep that number somewhere. It grows. 2.5 years before that Sunday, in November, a document was filed at the Franklin County Recorder's Office. I did not know it then. I would not know it for 2 more years. It was a quitclaim deed. A quitclaim is the fastest, bluntest kind of property transfer there is. 1 page, no promises. It simply says whatever interest this person has in this land, they give away. This one said that I, Nora Calloway, gave away my grandmother's house, signed it over to my parents, jointly, for the recorded price of $10. Quote, and love and affection. There was a signature on the line above my typed name. It was not mine. There was a notary stamp beside it. The little inked seal that is supposed to prove I stood in a room showed identification and signed in front of a sworn witness. I was never in any room. Hold on to that stamp. Of everything in this story, that cheap rubber stamp is the detail that ends it. I will call this document what my attorney later called it, the November deed. So for 2 years, my parents owned my house on paper, and I owned it in fact. And neither of us knew what the other knew. They rented it out that January to a young couple with a dog, $1,450 a month. I believed that money was going into an account with my name near it. It was going into my parents' checking account. And from there, it was going somewhere I could not have imagined yet. 26 months of rent. All told, before this ended, $1,450 a month. For 26 months, $37,700. That is not pocket money. That is a down payment on a first home. That is 2 full years of a nurse's rent, collected in the shadow of my name and spent as theirs. Now watch where it went, because this is the part of the story where my sister comes back in. 14 months before that Sunday, Bryn got engaged to a man who talked about himself in the third person and described every job he had ever quit as a pivot. His new pivot was an event venue, a renovated barn property north of the city that he and Bryn were going to turn into the most photographed wedding venue in central Ohio. They called it the Orchard House. They had a logo before they had a floor. What they did not have was money, and no bank on earth lends $250,000 to a logo. Unless the loan is secured. Unless somebody puts up a house. 13 months before that Sunday, in March, my father walked into a regional bank and took out a home equity loan against the house on Rosemere Avenue. $185,000. The collateral was my grandmother's house, which the bank believed my parents owned, because the November deed sat in the county record saying so. Wearing my traced signature like a mask. In the loan file, 1 page past the promissory note, my father signed a sworn statement, an affidavit, a document where you promise under penalty of law that what you are saying is true. He swore the property was his, free of any dispute, free of any other claim. Remember that page, too. It rides along with the November deed, all the way to the end. The money was wired to the venue's business account within the week. My grandmother's kitchen, the one that smelled like cinnamon for 50 years, was now the foundation under a barn with a logo. I will call this one the venue loan. I knew none of it. I was invited to the venue's launch party that spring and I went, and I stood under string lights and drank sparkling wine that my own inheritance had paid for, and I toasted my sister's future. If you have ever found out after the fact that you were the punchline of a party you attended, comment erased below. Because I have read 1,000 of your comments in my head this year, and I know I am not the only one. For the next year, the venue lost money, the way a bathtub with no plug loses water. I heard it in fragments at family dinners. Vendors unpaid. A roof problem. Bryn's fiancé calling it a soft launch year. My father getting quieter about it, which for him was the loudest possible alarm. And then came the brunch. Stay with me now. This is the morning. Everything in my life splits into before and after. It was a Sunday in April, 1 year and 3 months ago now. 11 a.m., a private room at a restaurant in Dublin, Ohio. 19 members of my family around one long table. celebrating the final venue walkthrough before Bryn's own wedding, which was, of course, going to be held at the Orchard House. I got there at 10:55. I remember because I sat in the parking lot until exactly 10:55, so I would not have to make small talk with my mother about why I was still not dating anyone serious. I was seated at the far end, past the cousins, in the seat you give to the coat rack, at 11:40 between the eggs and the cake. My father stood up and tapped his fork against a glass 3 times, and the room went quiet, the way rooms always went quiet for him. He gave a speech about family, about sacrifice, about how June, God rest her, would be so proud of what they were building, and then he reached under his chair and brought out a shoebox with a ribbon on it. And he slid it down the table to me, past 19 sets of eyes, and he said, "Nora, we sold Grandma's house last month. It broke my heart, but it stays in the family, sweetheart. It is all going into Bryn's future, and we wanted you to have this. Your share. The things that mattered. I want to be precise about the next 90 seconds, because I have replayed them the way my colleagues replay security footage." I untied the ribbon. Inside the shoebox was a folded dish towel with strawberries on it, a church bulletin from June's funeral, 3 photographs, and a smell, faint but real, cinnamon and dish soap, coming off the towel. And that smell hit me harder than the sentence had. My mother was watching my face with the bright warning smile she used in public. The smile that meant "Do not make this a thing," Bryn said. "The buyers are keeping the green door, if that makes you feel better." Her fiancé said the market had peaked anyway, so honestly, the timing was a blessing. Here is what nobody at that table knew. They believed they were telling me my inheritance had been liquidated. A cruel thing, but a legal one. What they were actually telling me without knowing it was that a property with my name on its deed had somehow been mortgaged, or moved without a single piece of paper ever reaching me, and I am the person paper reaches. That is the whole job. 19 people watched my face to see if I would cry, and instead the 9-year trained part of my brain quietly stood up inside me, walked to the front, and started asking questions in a flat voice. What sale? Closed. By which title agency? Funded by which bank? Signed by which owner? Because the owner was sitting at the end of the table, holding a dish towel. I did not scream. I did not announce my ownership to the room. I want you to understand why. Because this is the moment people in my comments will argue about. If I had stood up and said the house is mine, I would have handed my father 10 months of warning. 10 months to lawyer up, to muddy records, to rehearse the family into a single story. You do not tell the subject of an investigation that the investigation exists. That is not coldness. That is the first thing Delia ever taught me. 2nd month on the job. And she taught it to me with that red pencil, tapping on a fraud file. So I did the hardest professional thing I have ever done at a personal table. I said, "Thank you for the box." I stayed 19 more minutes. At 12:01 p.m., I kissed my mother's cheek. I told Bryn the venue would be beautiful. I carried my grandmother's dish towel out to my car, like it was made of glass. And I drove out of that parking lot with both hands steady on the wheel. I did not drive home. I drove to Rosemere Avenue and parked across the street from the little brick house with the green door. The rental couple's dog was in the window. Nothing about the house said sold. No sign, no lockbox, no moving truck. and I have driven past 4,000 closings worth of houses. I know what a sold house looks like in its first month. I sat there with my key ring in my lap, my grandmother's brass key warm from my pocket, and at 4:15 p.m. from my phone, I did what any citizen can legally do, and what I should have done 18 months earlier. I opened the Franklin County Recorder's public website, and I searched the address. The record loaded, and there it was, the November deed, filed 2.5 years before. 5 months after her funeral. Grantor, Nora Calloway. Grantee, my parents, jointly. My signature, except it was not my signature, sitting on my phone screen in the front seat of my car, and one line below it, recorded 13 months before that brunch. The venue loan, $185,000, against my grandmother's house. I have cried exactly once in this entire story, and it was there, alone, in a parked car on Rosemere Avenue at 4:20 in the afternoon, with the brass key pressed so hard into my palm. It left a mark that lasted until morning. It was not a long cry. It was not really about the house. It was about the shoebox. They had not only taken the thing my grandmother gave me, they had gift-wrapped the taking, slid it down a table, and waited for me to say thank you. And I had said it. Then I wiped my face. I took one screenshot of each recorded document, and I sent a text message I had been putting off for 3 years. Delia had retired 2 years earlier to a house full of houseplants on the east side, and I had kept meaning to visit her and kept letting work eat the weekends. The text said, "Can I come Saturday?" The reply came in 4 minutes. It said, "Bring the paper." That was all. 26 years in the business, and she knew from 5 words that if I was finally coming over, I was coming over with a document. That Saturday, 6 days after the brunch, I sat at Delia's kitchen table with printouts of the November deed and the venue loan between us, and I told her the whole thing, start to finish, and she did not interrupt once. She did not tell me she was sorry. She did not tell me it would be okay. She did not ask why I had not checked the records sooner, which was the question living in my chest, like a splinter. When I finished, she put on the glasses that still hung from the chain, and she read the November deed the way she had taught me to read, slowly, bottom corner first. Then she set down the page, took off the glasses, and said the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. They spent 3 years teaching everyone you are nothing. Honey, now you get to sit very still, while the paper teaches everyone what you are. People forget. On purpose. Paper remembers. I did not know yet exactly how right she was about to be, because Delia had noticed something on that deed in 90 seconds, that I, in my own flooded state, had looked straight past. She tapped the notary stamp with one finger, the little inked seal with the notary's name, and printed right inside the ring of it, the date that Notary State Commission expired. A notary's authority is not forever. It is a license with an end date, and the end date is stamped on every seal by law, so that anyone, anywhere, can check it. The commission on that stamp had expired at the end of July. The deed was notarized, according to its own face, in November, 4 months after the stamp's own printed expiration. Let me say that plainly, because it is the hinge of everything. The one witness whose entire legal purpose was to prove I was really in the room had stamped the document during a period when that stamp had no more legal power than a potato cut in half. Whoever forged my signature had grabbed an old stamp and had not read the fine print on it. And reading fine print is the family joke that I do for a living. Delia slid the page back across the table to me and said, "There is your loose thread, Nora. Now pull it slowly. Stay with me, because the next part is where a wronged daughter turns into a case file. And I need you to see every step, because every step was legal, boring, and completely unstoppable. Here is what the next 8 months looked like. Not a montage of revenge. A montage of paperwork, done quietly, in the right order, while I kept showing up to family dinners. First, that same month, I hired my own attorney, a property litigation lawyer. No one connected to my company, paid from my own savings. $22,000 over the whole case. In the end, and worth every cent. Second, on her advice, I said nothing to my family and changed nothing about my behavior. I went to Easter. I complimented the venue's new sign. I let my father squeeze my shoulder and call me his steady one. If you have ever had to smile across a table at someone while carrying evidence against them in your bag, you know it is its own kind of weightlifting. I did it for 8 months. Third, in August, 4 months after the brunch, my attorney retained a forensic document examiner. That is a specialist who studies handwriting and documents for courts. And the examination is not vibes, it is measurement. I gave her 10 years of my genuine signatures. Closing documents, my mortgage, my driver's license renewals, birthday cards, a gym waiver. In September, she issued a written opinion. 41 pages. I will call it the signature report. Its conclusion held 2 findings, and the second one is the one that still makes my skin prickle. Finding 1. The signature on the November deed was not written by my hand. Finding 2. The signature on the November deed was an exact match. Stroke for stroke, pause for pause, to one specific genuine signature from years earlier. A real person never signs their name identically twice, not once in a lifetime. An exact duplicate means one thing only: tracing. Someone had put a document of mine under that deed, or over a light, and drawn my name like a child copying a cartoon. And the source signature, the one it matched line for line, a birthday card. A card I had signed for my father's 60th birthday. He had kept it. He had kept it, and then he had laid a deed over my love. You dad and traced it into a theft. The examiner could not tell me who held the pen. She could tell me which document sat underneath it. That was enough for me to stop wondering. Fourth, in September, I filed a report with the police department, forgery and tampering with records, and handed a detective the cleanest evidence folder of his year. He asked me not to confront my family while his review was open, and that suited me down to the ground. And fifth, in the first week of December, 8 months after the brunch, my attorney finished drafting the 2 documents that would end the war in a single afternoon. A quiet title action, which is a lawsuit, that asks a judge to look at a property's tangled paper history and declare, once and for all, who the true owner is. And alongside it, a lis pendens. That is Latin, and it sounds fancy. But here is all it means. It is a public flag, recorded at the county, pinned to the property's record, that says this land is in dispute, and anyone who buys it or lends against it from this moment on has been warned. It costs almost nothing to file. It cannot be talked around, charmed, or explained away at a dinner table. And from the second it hits the record, a house becomes unsellable and unborrowable, against by anyone on this earth until a judge says otherwise. Both documents were signed, sealed in a folder in my attorney's cabinet, and left there, unfiled, waiting for one specific thing to happen. Then I went home, and I wrapped Christmas presents for the same people I was about to sue. And I waited for the paper to do what paper does. That was the whole strategy. My father's entire life ran on rooms. On toasts, on handshakes, on his voice, being the loudest warm thing in any space he entered. I had moved to fight to the one arena where he had never once won an argument, the county record, where there are no rooms, where nobody can charm a stamp. The trap I had set was not really a trap. It was gravity. The venue was failing, and I knew, the whole family knew, that money was running out. Sooner or later, my father would need to pull cash out of the only asset he thought he had, my grandmother's house, either by selling it or borrowing more against it. And the moment he tried, any title company in Ohio would open the county record, and the record would speak. I did not have to lure him anywhere. I just had to be patient while a man walked toward a door I had already locked, holding a key he did not know had stopped working. It took 10 weeks. In the third week of February, 10 months after the brunch, my father listed the house on Rosemere Avenue for sale, $320,000. He listed it himself, of course, his own face on the sign. The listing went public on a Thursday morning. My attorney filed the quiet title suit and recorded the list pendants before lunch on Friday, 27 hours. That was the head start we gave him. And it was 27 hours more than he had ever given me. Within 2 weeks, an offer came in, a closing was scheduled. And the buyer's lender ordered a title search. And here is where this story does the one thing I could never have planned, the thing I still think about at night. Of all the title agencies in the city, the order landed at mine, not on my desk, on my floor. I need to be very clear about what happened in the next hour. Because my career, and honestly the whole legitimacy of everything I had done, lived inside it. I was walking past the intake queue on a Tuesday morning at 9:40 a.m. and saw the address on a cover sheet, Rosemere Avenue. My grandmother's address. In my own building, I did not touch the file. I did not open the system record. I did not read one page. I turned around, walked into my managing counsel's office, closed the door, and disclosed everything. That I had a personal ownership claim on that property, that I was the plaintiff in an active lawsuit about it, that the file needed to be walled off from me completely. It is called a conflict of interest, and in my industry you do not manage it. You amputate it. The file went to an examiner, 2 floors up, whom I had never worked with. I signed a memo confirming I would have no contact with it. And then I went back to my desk and examined other people's property for the rest of the day, with my heart going like a rabbit. I never saw that file. I did not need to, because I already knew, better than anyone alive, exactly what the examiner 2 floors up was going to find, in exactly this order. A list pendens, screaming from the top of the record. This property is in dispute. Under it, an active quiet title lawsuit, naming the sellers. And under that, a quitclaim deed wearing an expired notary stamp, like a fake mustache. No title company would ensure that sale. No lender would fund it. It was not a judgment call. It was arithmetic. What happened next, I heard about in 3 ways at once, and I want you to hear it the same way, because it is the closest thing to a movie scene this true story contains. And nobody in it raises their voice. On the first Monday of March, the examiner, 2 floors up, finished the search and issued the title commitment, which is the industry's formal answer to the question, will we insure this sale? The answer ran to a list of requirements a page long, and sitting at the top of it, in the flat gray language my industry uses for catastrophes, were 3 lines. Pending litigation, affecting title. Notice of lis pendens of record. Instrument in the chain of title, bearing apparent notarial defect. Translation. For everyone at that closing table, this sale is dead. The sellers are being sued over whether they own this house at all. And one of their deeds appears to be fake. The buyer's agent read it and withdrew the offer. By dinner time, the buyer's lender read it and closed the file, and the listing agent, my father, read it and understood. For the first time, sitting alone in his car outside his own office, that the daughter he had handed a shoebox was the plaintiff, whose name was stapled to his house. That same week, the process server found my parents at home on a Wednesday evening and handed them the lawsuit. I was not there. I have imagined it exactly once, and then made myself stop, and 9 days after that, the second envelope arrived. The one I had not filed and did not control, because here is the thing about pulling one loose thread in a county record. Other people's sweaters are attached to it. The bank that held the venue loan ran its own review the moment the lis pendens surfaced, and the bank's lawyers reached the same arithmetic mine had. Their $185,000 loan was secured by a house their borrowers had never legally owned, pledged with a sworn affidavit that was false the day it was signed. A bank can forgive a late payment. A bank cannot forgive fake collateral. They declared the loan in default and demanded the full balance, all of it, at once. And the only thing my parents had left to satisfy it with was their own house, the one in Westerville, the one with 30 years of Christmases in it. The Orchard House venue announced its closure 11 days later. In an online post about new chapters and gratitude, Bryn's wedding, the wedding the whole scheme had been feeding, was scheduled to happen under those string lights. 9 weeks from the day the power was shut off. My phone, during all of this, became a museum of my family's stages of grief. I saved every voicemail on my attorney's instruction, and I answered none. On my own. First came my father, warm, big, unbothered. Day 1. Nora, honey, there has been some kind of paperwork mix-up. Call your old man. We'll laugh about this. Day 4. Less warm. Nora, whatever you think you found, you are embarrassing yourself, and you are hurting your sister. Day 9. After the bank's letter, no warmth at all. Just a flat voice I had never heard from him, saying, "You don't do this to family." That one I listened to twice. Because that sentence, in his mouth, after everything, told me my whole childhood, in 7 words. The rules had never been rules. They had been fences, and every fence had a gate on his side. My mother tried a different door. She showed up at my office lobby on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. with a bag of oranges, as if I were homesick from school, and told the receptionist she was here to see her daughter about a family misunderstanding. I came down. I did not take the oranges. She held my hands and said, "Sweetheart, your father made a mistake in his grief. He was going to make it right. Don't turn a mistake into a crime." And I looked at the woman who had watched me pay for my own braces, and I said the only sentence I had prepared for her. He didn't make a mistake, Mom. He made a tracing. A mistake shakes when it signs. His hand didn't shake. She left the oranges with the receptionist. I gave them to the mailroom. Bryn texted me one time. It said, "You could have just talked to us. You are doing all this over a house." I read it in the parking garage, and I typed nothing back for a long time. And then I sent the only reply that whole year that I allowed myself to sharpen. I wrote, "You are right. It was just a house. It was just my house." She did not respond. Her wedding moved to a courthouse. In April, I genuinely hope it was a good day. I was not invited, and for the first time in my life, not being invited to something in my family felt like weather instead of wound. There was one meeting. One. In late March, 11 months after the brunch, my father's new criminal defense attorney requested a sit-down, and my attorney and the detective's timeline allowed it. And I said yes, on 3 conditions. My attorney's conference room, 45 minutes. And I speak first, without interruption. They came. All 3 of them. My father in the good gray suit he wore to closings. My mother beside him, Bryn by the window, refusing to sit. He started to stand and open his arms and say my name in the voice, the toast voice, the room voice. And I said, "Sit down, Dad. This isn't a room anymore. It is a record." Then I informed them. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I did not ask a single question. Because questions hand people microphones. And I was done handing this family microphones. I read from a single page, 5 numbered statements, and it took 4 minutes. 1. I own the house on Rosemere Avenue. Grandma deeded it to me 4 years ago while she was alive, at her own request, and that deed is valid and recorded. 2. The November deed is a forgery. A certified forensic document examiner has concluded in writing that the signature was traced, stroke for stroke, from the birthday card I gave you for your 60th. You kept my card. Dad, that was the sweetest and worst thing I learned this year. 3. The notary stamp on that deed expired 4 months before you used it. The woman it belonged to has told detectives she never notarized anything for you, and that her old stamp disappeared from her desk drawer the year she retired from your office. She kept the drawer. By the way, detectives photographed it. 4. The quiet title case will return the house to my name. The bank's case is the bank's. The criminal case is the state's. I do not control those 2. I would not stop them if I could. And no conversation in any room, including this one, can reach any of the 3. 5. I am not here to negotiate, because there is nothing I want from you that a judge is not already going to hand me. I am here so that no one, at any future funeral, can say, "I never told you to your face." Then I folded the page. My father had gone the color of the conference table. My mother was crying, without sound, and Bryn, my sister, said the one honest thing anyone in my family said that entire year. She said, quietly, to the window, "You knew at the brunch. You sat there with the shoebox, and you already knew." And I said, "Number, at the brunch, I suspected." By that night, I knew, and for 10 months after that, I did exactly what this family trained me to do my whole life. I sat quietly, and I handled the paperwork. I picked up my bag. At the door, my father found his voice, and it cracked in the middle when he said it was supposed to stay in the family. And I turned around and gave him back his own toast. The sentence he had draped over a coffin and a shoebox and a barn with a logo. It is staying in the family. Dad, it is staying with me. You are just not going to be in it. 45 minutes had been reserved. I used 11. Now, let me tell you what the consequences looked like. because I promised you at the top that the paper would take the performance apart. And I keep my promises in writing. In May, 13 months after the brunch, my father accepted a plea agreement, forgery and tampering with records, both felonies. Under Ohio law, because he was 66, because he had no prior record, and because he signed a full written admission. There was no prison. There was 5 years of probation. There was a restitution order, and there was the admission itself, 4 pages, filed in a public court record, describing in his own attorney's tidy language how he had traced his daughter's signature from a birthday card onto a deed at his kitchen table. The restitution came to $61,400. $37,700 of it was the rent. Every month of it, paid back to me, with interest. The rest covered my legal fees. And the examiner, he is paying it in monthly installments. The first check arrived in an envelope, with no note. I would have framed a note. The silence I just deposited. The same month, the Ohio board that licenses real estate agents opened its own file. Because a felony conviction involving a real estate document is for a licensing board. Roughly, what a shark fin is for a lifeguard. My father did not fight it. He surrendered the license he had held for 30 years, permanently. In a 2-paragraph letter, his attorney wrote for him. By June, his face came off the bus benches. The brokerage pried his name off the office door and repainted the glass inside a week. 30 years of being the loudest warm voice in every room in that zip code. And in the end, his whole professional life was removed with a razor blade and a heat gun by a sign contractor, who had no idea whose name he was scraping. The bank settled with my parents rather than take their house at auction. But the settlement required the house to be sold. The Westerville house went on the market in June, listed by a stranger, because my father was no longer legally allowed to list anything. It sold in 9 days. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom rental across town. My mother sent me a letter in July, 4 pages, handwritten. And I want to be fair to her, so I will tell you exactly what was in it. There were memories. There were explanations. There was a great deal about how hard this had been. On your father, there was the sentence. Families survive worse than this. There was not anywhere in 4 pages the word sorry, and there was not anywhere in 4 pages my grandmother's name. I read it twice to be sure. Then I put it in a drawer. Yoon answered, next to the strawberry dish towel, which felt like exactly where it belonged. Some letters are apologies. Some letters are exhibits. Paper remembers which one it is, even when the writer doesn't. And on a Thursday morning in June, 14 months after the brunch, a judge in the Franklin County Courthouse granted my quiet title case. It took 9 minutes. My father, as part of his plea, had stipulated to everything, which is a legal word meaning he agreed in advance, and did not contest it, so there was no drama, no testimony, no scene, just a judge reading, a clerk stamping, and a court order declaring the November deed void from the day it was born, as if it had never existed, and confirming that the little brick house on Rosemere Avenue had belonged. That entire time, through every rent check, and every toast, and every string light, to Nora Calloway, one person from my family, came to that hearing. My father's cousin, the one who used to drive Grandma to church on Sundays, a quiet man I had maybe exchanged 200 words with in my life. He sat on my side of the aisle, in the second row, in a pressed shirt. Afterward, on the courthouse steps, he shook my hand like we were concluding a business deal and said, June knew what she was doing when she picked you. We all knew. We just let the loud ones do the talking. Then he walked to his truck. That was the entire conversation. And I have carried it around all summer like a stone that stays warm. The tenants, the young couple with the dog, had done nothing wrong. And I told them so. And I offered them the choice to stay on a proper lease with me as the landlord their rent had secretly belonged to all along. They chose to buy their own place instead, and on their last day, the wife knocked on the door while I was standing in the empty kitchen. And she was holding a wooden box. She said they had found it in the attic crawl space 2 years ago, behind the insulation, and it had felt like something that should stay with the house. So they had left it up there, undisturbed. The whole time, it was the recipe box. Pie crusts, casseroles. And filed behind the casseroles, 50 years of index cards in my grandmother's handwriting. The whole archive of me. Made honor roll. Paid for her own braces. Imagine that. Promoted again, told Walt. He changed the subject, and the last card, dated 4 years before the brunch. The same week as the attorney's office. And the parking lot, and the brass key pressed into my palm. It said, "Gave Nora Bird the house today. Best paperwork I ever did." I cried exactly once in this story, and I told you where. And I held the line even there in that kitchen. But I will admit to you that it was close. I read that card standing on the same linoleum where she used to stand. And I laughed instead. One loud laugh in an empty house. Because, of course, the woman who saw me would say it in paperwork. It runs in the family. The real family. The one that was always only ever the two of us. Plus, a filing system. Here is where I am now. This summer. Today. I live in the house. On Rosemere Avenue. I did not sell it, though I ran the numbers the way I run all numbers. And it would have been the sensible move. And I ignored the numbers for the first time in my life. The green door stays. The kitchen smells like cinnamon again, because I make her pie crust recipe badly. On purpose, every other Sunday, off an index card. On the day I moved in, a locksmith came at 8 a.m. and changed every lock in the house. And when he handed me the new keys, I took my grandmother's brass key off my ring for the first time in 4 years. It does not open anything anymore. I put it in the recipe box, filed behind the last index card, where it lives now, and I understood, standing there, that its job had changed. For 4 years, that key had been a promise. I was too trusting to check on. Now it is a record. Proof that a door was mine. Even in the years when other people were walking through it, my father held a shoebox over a table and called it my share. My grandmother hid a recipe box behind the insulation, and it turned out to hold the whole estate. The part that mattered, the written proof that somebody had been keeping accurate books on my worth since I was 6 years old. I do not have a father anymore. I have a restitution schedule. I do not have that version of a family anymore. And I want to be honest with you. The way this whole story has tried to be honest, there are still nights when that costs something. Peace is not a fireworks feeling. It is quieter than what it replaces. And at first, the quiet can be mistaken for loss. But then, a check arrives with no note, and I deposit it. Or my phone stays silent through an entire Sunday. And the silence belongs to me. Or I lock my green door at night with a key nobody traced. In a house nobody can toast away. And I think about what Delia told me at her kitchen table with her glasses on the chain. The truest sentence anyone has ever handed me for free. People forget, on purpose. And women, paper remembers. Members, they spent 30 years writing me as the footnote in their story. It turns out, I was the record. If this story found you in your own quiet year, while you sit still and do the paperwork, subscribe and stay close, because there are more stories like mine, told the way they actually happen. In filings, instead of fireworks. And if there is somebody who kept index cards on you, somebody who saw you when the loud ones did the talking, go check the attic. The people who really loved us were usually better at paperwork than we knew.